All right. Hello, all. I hope everyone's doing well. If people are watching, or anyone that's, I don't know, people are going to be jumping between two, so forget that comment. But
Mhm.
first off, how are you doing, sir? How have you been doing? How's your family doing since this devastating war?
Um, Doing fine. I think. It's been a week and a bit. So yeah, already feels like we've
A
been at.
lifetime ago.
Yeah, but yeah, family's okay, but you know, shaken but motivated.
Shaken but motivated. Yeah, you really are seeing beautiful responses from the people of Israel. I think the leadership is a fail, but I think the people themselves are really stepping up to the plate and really revealing Mi Ka'amcha Israel, who are like your people Israel. Just
Mhm.
like it's because it's not 7 degrees of separation with Jews, it's like 1 degree of separation. It's everyone is volunteering and supporting and helping and packages and deliveries. Specifically, I'm looking at the reaction from the secular and from the ultra orthodox, and there's been a lot of ultra orthodox would like to enlist right now. So it's not that I want them necessarily to enlist. It's just I want people to realize that we are doing this thing together. Sorry that I'm talking about Zionism. I'll fix it, Jacob, by saying I hope that the Jewish people will recognize how they need to accept the yoke of God on them, and hopefully Israel will become the proper state it was supposed to be. Um,
Yeah, but
uh,
I think the situation in Israel kind of just to kind of like it kind of puts an emphasis on the difference between there's the political Zionism, and then there's the existential Zionism. Like it, like there's a reason why history has brought us to that place at that particular point of time, and that's because usually stuff like this will happen, and then people will just need to move or just build up whatever they could. Right? The Jews would have to do that, and now there's actually a chance where you can improve the situation and not let it happen again. So that's a
uh,
different Zionism.
yeah, I listen. To me, this is all like on biblical scale. Depending on what will happen, we'll see if it's actually biblical. But to me, this is, and if there's a book I think you'd find fascinating if you're down to read it. Um, it's called Hesped LeMashiach, a eulogy for Messiah by Rabbi Yuda Leon Ashkenazi.
Hmm.
Mini two, and it's like reading it, you tremble because it's so relevant to like what Israel's dealing with right now. But this also relates to the relationship between Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, and it relates to them each recognizing themselves as such, each recognizing the other and understanding its necessity. But hopefully the silver lining will be that this battle, just like we will galvanize after the declaration, the War of Independence, and the 6 Day War. Hopefully, this will be. If we were in Rashit Tzmichat Geulatenu, then hopefully we could be in the next part of the chapter
Hmm.
after this war. And yes, Israel will always be different, and um, I hope the sons of this new generation, my kids, are merging into a new Israel, and hopefully one that is um, more, I would say, more connected religiously and more connected. I want to say democratically, I guess, but basically, like really trying to balance that and be a proper light to the nations. Having said that, the learning that we'll be doing now is in commemoration of all those who have lost their lives, and uh, and it's totally fine if you want to use this to all the ones that innocent that lose their lives in Gaza as well. Ashrei Adam Shenivra B'Tselem. All of us are created in God's image. Um, Also, for the captives, of course, our prayers go out to them, and we hope for a swift return for them home safely.
Amen.
We were on.
So I think so. We're in chapter 3, and I think the last one that we did was Hey 5.
No, I don't think we did. Hey, can you go back to the one beforehand? Yeah, and we finished with Chezi and Ben, I think, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. We discussed how stopping from learning, really keeping yourself distracted. It deals with the moments when one could, waking up at night and doom scrolling, or the second you have a moment for yourself and deciding to just use that time to immediately pick up your phone, just to not have that second of being bored. This is where the Bible, the Mishnah is already telling you should be maximizing your time, even your lull time. And it's not necessarily because you should be learning. Rather, this is magic time for you to look inwards, be introspective. And these are not moments where you need to be nervous about. Rather, these are moments that you should be able to celebrate and realize how valuable they are.
Yeah.
It's it makes me think about when you find $10 in your pocket, right? That's not money that you're going to save. That's magic money that must be spent. So here too, if you wake up and that your wife is sleeping in the middle of the night, you've woken up to magic time, you could think with zero responsibility. All right, so Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana Omer, Kol HaMekabel Alav Ol Torah, Ma'avirin Mimeno Ol Malchut, ועול דרך ארץ, וכל הפורק ממנו עול תורה, נותנים עליו עול מלכות ועול דרך ארץ. Rabbi Nechunya, the son of Hakana, would say, one who accepts upon himself the yoke of Torah is exempt from the yoke of government duties and the yoke of worldly cares. The one who casts off the yoke of Torah is saddled with the yoke of government duties and the yoke of worldly care. Okay, so that is... 1 second. There's something wrong with my screen. Please.
Hi.
I'm just muting myself for a minute. All right. Sorry. I'm back with us. Can you hear me okay? See me okay?
Yeah. Both.
So, Nechunya, he's a student of Yochanan ben Zakkai, YBZ, right? So he's living before the destruction of the temple. Some say that he was the author, the source of, let's say, the earlier renditions of Sefer HaBahir. This is a seminal book in Kabbalah and mysticism. This is where we're introduced for the first time with Yordei HaMerkava, the chariot descenders, the descenders of the chariot. Chariot being the biblical term from Ezekiel, which according to Maimonides is talking about metaphysics, while the creation story Maaseh Bereshit is talking about let's say physics, in a certain aspect. The reason it's called the descendants of the chariot is because the attitude is that the person's highest value thought in their hierarchy is their worldview. So you need to descend from this palace you created yourself of your own worldview and go into the real depths of reality. So that's the dude we're talking about. Interesting character. And Hakana, Ben Hakana is just the name of his father. It's not to be confused with Kana, like Kfar Kana, which was also up north. So we say, Kol HaMekabel Alav Ol Torah, Ma'avirin Mimeno Ol Malchut Ve'ol Derech Eretz. So it's not only, here we're saying it's not only the study of Torah, right? It's taking on the yoke of Torah, right? So I've used this term before, like the framework or the iOS operating system of the Torah, which is, you're accepting that Oculus for how you're going to live your practical and internal life, right? So while, like, according to the Rambam, actually, we're talking about here just like classic Torah learning that we've been talking about before, like pick up your Mishnah and study it and do it with all the versions we were discussing.
Right.
There's another take in showing, like, you really need to show, and some interpret as you need to show that it's a burden to you in a certain aspect, like you have to work hard for it. But I think specifically giving its counterparts over here, which are the Ol Malchut and Ol Derech Eretz, right? The yoke of government duties and the yoke of worldly cares. I think it's important all of these are considered yokes. And I want to say all of these are considered frameworks and operating systems that we have, right? This is like the social and the culture pillars that we're taking onto ourselves, and the natural pillars that we're taking onto ourselves. And we can decide what is guiding our life. Right? Is guiding my life what TMZ is saying, like the culture and the new look, or what's guiding my life, the Torah? And in a certain sense, it's not like if you don't study Torah, if you are studying Torah, you are now, let's say, exempt from taxes. While there actually are some that interpret this as you are exempt from taxes, like we've mentioned in the past, where there's versions where the very learned people, the community pays for their Torah study. Or like when we said aselech harav, meaning like make yourself a rabbi, someone that's going to also, in some versions we said that gets interpreted as he'll be your patron basically and allow you to study. So there's that interpretation. However, I'm not saying that you don't have to pay taxes. I'm saying that thinking about taxes and bills is not going to be like the thing you're thinking about, right? People talk about, like, death and taxes, or like if you accept your operating system as the Torah, and that's the main yoke you have on, the other yokes are just not as heavy. They don't weigh you down as much. But if you decide to take this yoke off, right, and you decide that you don't want to be like deeply involved in the in the study of Torah, then you are really going to feel those concerns from, everyday secular concerns and government concerns. They suddenly become the real for you. And
right, it's a question of a hierarchy. What do you hold? What do you hold most value? What are you optimizing for?
Exactly.
So everything else is like a sub goal. Right. I do have a question, just about something specific that you mentioned. I don't know if you mentioned that the Rambam looks at this like this, or this is just part of the commentary.
Yeah.
General commentary. But you mentioned how you need to show that it's a burden on you at all.
Yeah.
How does that play out with the fact that studying Torah should only be done with joy? And I'm guessing also just doing mitzvot is also, all of that interaction should be done with joy. So how, if it's a burden, how can one be joyful?
That's a totally fair question, and I think that turns into like more of like similar to like the fear of God, which is not like the fear you have from, let's say, a terrorist, for example, right? This is like reverence, and the yoke you're taking on, this is a yoke that you're taking on sort of with, when there's people in the gym pumping iron, there's a lot of endorphins being sent, and they're super pumped about it as well, even though it's extremely hard for them to do it. And that is the extra effort that you're putting inside. No one wants to see someone walk into the gym like whistling the whole time and like walking out. Rather, you need to show the amount of effort you're putting on. And sometimes like there's people in the gym that decide to like yell and make extra sounds while they're working, because like it's really difficult for them to pick up this dumbbell, right? So I don't work out, and I don't have like a workout culture, but that's what they say. So yes, I just wanted to look at the comments, which I'm looking at right now. This Dan Smith, Joseph needed to establish the first recorded clergy tax exempt classification. There you go. He was setting up the groundwork to allow the ultra orthodox not to work in Israel. All right, onwards.
Yeah, onwards. Yeah, okay. It's just I don't think it's just very interesting to consider the physical metaphor we're talking here about like the spiritual, but it's and obviously not only spiritual, but this is daily life. But how just this playing out of joy and burden, suffering, and how it's so hard to think about it in terms of like like separating those. Sometimes those are like even in the physical. I don't know. There's something there.
There's a difference though between the study of Torah and the yoke of Torah, where like you should be studying Torah obviously when you're joyous. But the yoke of Torah is the framework you're taking on. And in that framework, it means you can't eat that food that you really wanted. That's not joyous necessarily in that moment, but that is the yoke. It's difficult for me to do this. I wanted to go out, but I can't go out because
right. The cheeseburger looks really tasty, but I won't have it. Right.
I won't have it. And but that is, that is the idea of, it's much more gratifying when you've put in the effort. And that is, I'm saying, so you need to show that the effort is being done. It's not necessarily that like I have a great study hall over here. No, go to one in Japan and like travel every day. Like that's not practical, right? Because again, you have to be reading this with all the other things. Assuming you have a job, assuming you have money, assuming you got married, like all the other stuff that they first already, the mission at the same time is putting into place for you. Like, well, obviously don't do it if like, you're going to be studying like, like in a stinky place. And obviously like, so they're already controlling for so many of this like quote unquote yoke, very difficult yoke that you're taking on. However, it's saying that you have to realize if you're just like on flying on automatic, then you're not feeling the yoke of the Torah because it is limiting in a certain sense. It's that limitation allows for you to ascend and reach higher heights. But there's a process of that. And we have to be removing the peel during that process.
Yeah.
Right? Or like the cocoon, right? That process is painful.
Right.
Okay. So like we just said, on the flip side, that's what happened if you decide to live in those frameworks and you're going to be stuck arguing about did or didn't the Kardashians, fill in the blank, whatever the next scandal is, if there's still a thing, the Kardashians. I'm not sure. Okay. Next, number 6. Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa, ish kfar Hanania, omer, 10 שיושבים ועוסקים בתורה, שכינה שורה ביניהם, שנאמר, אלוהים ניצב בעדת אל. ומניין אפילו 5, שנאמר, ואגודתו על הארץ יסדה. ומניין אפילו 3, שנאמר, בקרב למשפוט. ומניין אפילו 2, שנאמר, אז נדברו יראי אדוני איש אל רעהו, ויקשב אדוני וישמע. ומניין אפילו 1, שנאמר, בכל המקום אשר אזכיר את שמי אבוא אליך. Let's just read this in English as well. Rabbi Chalafta, the son of Dosa, of the village of Hanania, would say, 10 who sit together and occupy themselves with Torah, the divine presence rests among them. As it is stated, the Almighty stands in the congregation of God, in Psalms. And from where do we know that such is also the case with 5? From the verse, he established his band on earth. It's the best band on earth. And 3, from the verse, he renders judgment in the midst of the tribunal. Also Psalms. And 2, from the verse, then the God-fearing conversed with one another, and God listened and heard. Malachi. And from where do we know that such is the case, even with a single individual? From the verse, every place where I have my name mentioned, I shall come to you and bless you. All right. So, interesting Mishnah, which there's also echoes from the Mishnahs we read recently, if you recall. Okay, let's just put things in context. Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa, so he is Rabbi Meir's student. And some people called him Abba Chalafta as well. We don't know much about him. We know that he's from Kfar Hanania, which was They were known for making very good plates, like ceramic plates that were like very strong. I don't know if they were pretty, but they were very strong.
Durable.
Get your plates. I think there might even have like a thing still there in Kfar Hanan Yab North where they still make plates.
Mhm.
Probably better technology, but that's what they do. Okay, so we're talking about these 10. Asarash Yoshvin Poskim B'Torah Shechina Shreya B'nehem Shneimar Elohim Nitzav Be'adat El. So first, why 10? 10 has a communal dimension to it. 10 is, the world was created with 10 utterances. There's the 10 plagues. There's the 10 commandments. The number 10 also is like shows on multiplicity. Like, there's more to it that grows. However, that's why the letter Yud is 10, which is like, it's a dot. So it shows like unity in multiplicity. It's like a center dot, but it represents multiplicity. So we have a lot of numbers that we've discussed over here, like 3, 5. And so like 10 is also one of those heavy hitter numbers. So we're not surprised that we are seeing the number 10. Mm-hmm. There is a difference because you could ask off the bat, like last time we ended also saying it could be 2 or it could be 1 when we had a certain discussion. So like, there is a linguistic difference over here. Last time we spoke about that shtaim sheyesh benehem, that have been between them Torah. Here we're talking about people that oskim b'Torah, Torah, that are dealing with Torah itself at like a different level, where you're saying that like sort of if it's between two people, then you sort of know it's legit that they're talking about the Torah, because that's the point of conversation that two people are having. When it's 10 people, if it's just a conversation, then that could really go all over the place. When it's 10 people, but they're focused on it, then like we could see more that like it makes sense that God would be there, because that is a specific discussion about the Torah. Mm-hmm. As far as like the verse it uses over here, Elohim nitzav be'adat el, and in English it was the mighty stands in the congregation of God, right? So this the congregation there is specifically talking about, we see the word congregation is also used in Edah, which was used with Cheta Ega, with the calf. Mm-hmm. And there the reference that it was talking about 10 people. So this is where they learn that Edah and Edah is talking about 10 people. That's at least like what the commentary has taught. That's what we learn. That we're talking about 10 people over there. And obviously if it's an edah, if a congregation actually did establish itself, then it's sort of demanding of God to be present as well. So that's...
Is the story, the having a minyan is like from the spies. And is that's also 10? I don't know if they uses it.
Sorry, not the golden calf, the spies.
The spies. Okay.
Chetem Meraglim. Sorry. Chetem Meraglim. Okay. Correct. That's the edah that we learn about the 10.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Good on you. Just those are the two big sins, and I blundered them. Yeah. Okay. Minayin afilu chamisha sheneemar. We say ve'agudato al aretz yazda. So here too, aguda. You could also learn about it from like we just had Sukkot, where you do an agudah, you bring all the different plants together. Mm-hmm. But agudah is usually shown as 5 fingers that are brought together as one. And this is not like 10, right? So this is less than the 10, mm-hmm. which is more, like we said, communal. So this is strong. It's defensive, but it's still it's still oriented properly. So you can be like, it's more of a defensive stance as a fist, which you would be like is less ideal than the communal, which is already more accepting. But nonetheless, even defensive-ness, apropos our situation right now in Israel, there's still a solid orientation to that. And that's why God still, he is still the foundation of that orientation of the Agudah. So therefore, he must be there as well.
Yeah.
Uminayin afilu shlosha. And where do we know about 3? Shenemar bekerev Elohim yishpot. So here, this is very specific, where we're talking about 3 over here. Elohim is in the context of the judges, of the dayanim, people that are are a court system in Jewish law, and there we learn in Jewish law that the minimum for a court system is of 3. So here we see that even if 3 are getting together now to pass judgment on something that's going on, so here again they require God's presence to be there to assist them through this, and as 3 they're calling up upon him for that kind of guidance. Again, so this is less than 5, which we said was oriented. This is 3, and there could be people going a different direction, but yet their goal is to try to bring truth to light. So that's why we're still asking for God to show his presence in that case as well.
So if we're thinking about like judgment,
yeah,
it just came up in my head. Maybe it's, I don't know if it's but if we're thinking about judgment, right? We were saying that 3 is a number that's good to judge somebody or to put down a specific law. Then how is the relation? Is God in that particular point considered another
Fourth?
vote? Yeah, fourth. Yeah, that was what I was trying to say. Or does it imbue the third person? Does it imbue everybody? So how? Yeah.
So I think it's apropos what's going on also right now with the prayer I'm focusing on the most right now is V'ata chonen la'adam dat, right? That you grant people wisdom, unoten le'enosh bina, but knowledge and understanding. So I'm praying that our leaders have knowledge and understanding and wisdom at this moment, that God should grant them this. So here too, I think this is more of a case where like you are asking for wisdom, you are asking for guidance. Right. It's less. So I would say there you're asking for guidance. God is always present in all places. Rather, you're asking for guidance that because the famous story of the oven of Achnai, right? And when we know the story ends with God saying, "Nitzchuni banai," my sons have bested me. This is a sense where like we are playing with loaded guns over here, where like your commandment is going to, in a certain way, God is going to co-sign what you wrote because those are the game. That's like people ask, I don't know, when they're fairly young, I don't know, 15, 16, can God create a rock that he can't lift, right? So the answer is yes, it's called free will, right? He's giving us this thing to do where he's saying like, I'm allowing you to play the game. More than that, like I'm playing with you. So you're asking though, you're saying, because I'm going to evoke your name. I'm going to bring you into this. So please grant me your guidance because ultimately it's one. And once I'm going to say that this guy is innocent or not innocent, you are co-signing on this basically.
Right. And it's going to happen. It's going to take form in this place. So it's not going to be something that's abstract. This person is going to be affected by whatever we are deciding.
And ultimately God, right, as we say when someone dies, the blessing is Baruch Dayan HaEmet. Blessed he, the judge of truth, the one who judges truthfully. So ultimately he is the judge of truth, right? So he's always present. But we're saying on this plane where we're doing this, we ask for your guidance. We ask for your light to shine through.
Yeah.
Okay. ומניין אפילו שניים, שנאמר, אז ידברו יראי השם, איש אל רעהו, ויקשב השם, וישמע. So, God is also listening to, obviously, the conversation of God-fearers, even if it's between two people. It'd be interesting, I need to look into this, if this Pasaluk, where is this verse from? Malachi. It'd be interesting because God-fearers is also one of the names for the Noahites. And it would be interesting to me to see if this is like another verse where you could see that like God is specifically having a relationship and listening like to the Noahites, saying like, if you're wondering like, you know, the Jews have this relationship with God and like I'm sort of on the periphery over here. And like, no, there's a relationship that God is saying you could have with him, but I'll have to look into that on my own. I think what we should notice over here, we could also ask, like we said 2 over here, right? And we said 2 last time. So why the repeat?
Yeah.
And I think here you have the focus on Az nidabru yirei Hashem ish el re'ehu vayakshev, right? So it's reminding you that even the conversation with the two people, if one is not listening to the other, then it's not considered anymore. Even that conversation where we're talking about, and we said where it wasn't la'asok, right? We're having this more flowy conversation right now. Even then, it's only if there's an actual dialogos happening between the two people where the presence is there. Because if you're not hearing the other person, you're not seeing the other. There isn't ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. There isn't seeing God's face like Jacob says when he sees Esau, "Vera'iti pnei el." There isn't that if I'm not hearing you, if I'm not accepting you, if I'm not bringing you in. So this is just like you could learn from this pasuk that they use as reference to the one we read previously.
Right. So when it is two people that are conversing, there are specific conditions for when a God can be present, and it's only when there is, like you said, when there's all real dialogos, when there's really listening and back and forth,
right?
And not when you're pretending like you're having a conversation,
right?
Those are specific conditions.
But so it's interesting. But with 10 people, right? It's not dialogos. It needs to be a project.
Mm-hmm.
Because with 10 people, how fruitful is your dialogos going to be, right?
Right. So, I mean, this ties into kind of my general question, which I think we kind of are answering you just answered, but by separating the different conditions for each one is, if you're telling me that that God is present in 10 people, or that God is present when it's just one person, then obviously it's present when there's 10 people. So why go through 10, 5, 8, 3? So, right, it's like, why the presumed redundancy? But one way to think about it is, like you mentioned, we want to specify how, when it's 10, the context and the conditions are different. There's a different way of syncing with God, and when it's 2, there's a different way of syncing in God. When it's 1, it's a different way. So that's what
because let's go back to, like, we have this moment. I woke up in the middle of the night, right? So like that's one level of conversation with God, and we are told even with one, and we're going to see in a second, like he's also there, obviously. So like yes, talk to him then, but that's a much different conversation that you're going to have where Jordan Peterson does his roundtable, which is like a project where we're all going to sit around this table and discuss this topic. Okay, so even if there's already at that point, there's a dialogos happening, which is nice. That wasn't you guys decided to go get pizza and then have a 17-hour conversation about Exodus. Rather, it was something that's pointed. I would mention, though, just as far as your question, like, why do we, if we know it's at 1, why are we not starting with 1? Because sort of like the 70 facets of God, right? Or the Shivim Panim LaTorah, like the more vantage points you have, the more of God you're going to start being seen, right? So like, yes, the one person can have that conversation, but he's going to eventually get to the limits of his intellect. Yeah. But once he puts his hand around and you create that human chain, you now are leveling up, because that allows you now to really, which is why dialogos is important. It allows you sort of to reach that next level. I forget what this is called, like in physics, but like, you know, there's like those holes that you could be sitting in there, like are built like a cone. And if you just try to walk up, you'll keep sliding. But if you keep on running like in this circle sort of around, eventually you just make it sort of to the top. And like it requires this motion sort of around. And like I would say, like sort of with all these people, the more people you have, the you know, like you have this edah, you have this this whole group. And eventually you have a kahal, and eventually you have an am, right? You have a people. And you know,
and the possibilities are different for each one. Yeah, it kind of connects to something that I studied yesterday, where it's even just having one other person other than yourself allows you to actually be effective with your midot, with your emotions. Your emotions are, in one way, they are for you, because you can be happy or sad or love or hate. But it's only when there is somebody outside of you that you can actually effectively love or hate them. Like you can do something with that. Or more practically, like if you want to donate or volunteer, right? Like if you want to do tzedakah, you can do tzedakah when it's only you you need to have somebody else that you're helping. So that's why you need one other person. And if you have 10 people, you can do tzedakah on a different scale, and it's a different interaction, and there's something else, and you kind of play around with that. So yeah.
I think just to dovetail on something you were saying about like you can't give charity yourself. That's why in Jewish law, even the poor person has to give charity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously within limits. If he has nothing, then nothing. But the idea is that like you too should feel that like you're always going to deal. The Torah sort of sees the reality of, I don't know what happens in the world to come, but sees a reality where like there's always poverty, and like it requires people sort of dealing with that. Even the poor people need to realize that reality as well and pay it forward, so to speak. All right. Minyan uminayin afilu echad shenemar b'chol makom asher azkir et shmi avo elecha u'bechaticha. That's in Shemot. Yes, that's in Exodus. Exactly. Okay. So like we said, any place where we're going to evoke God's name, he'll be there ultimately. He's like, he's one place. There's, we mentioned, V'aseh beitcha vad lachachamim, make your house a place where the wise people, the sages congregate. So Rav Chaim from Volozhin, the famous Rav Chaim, he says that like in one's books, in one Torah books, you're never alone because you have all the sages and the commentary on the side. So there's constantly this joint learning. You're never learning alone because you're always learning through the prism of the ones who came before you. There's Rav Soloveitchik, as I'm sure you're reading his books in a book club. So there's a famous story of his where as a child, he talks about how he would hear his father have like these discussions and learning groups, and he would be in his bed. And when his father would come in, he would ask him, he's like, did Maimonides win? Did the Rambam win? And he said like, no, not today. And he would go to bed like sad because obviously, ultimately, he had probably a very strange childhood. But he and his family, the Brisk family and the Brisk dynasty specifically, like really lived in this world where they had these sort of conversations. There's this famous anime show called Baki Hana, and in Baki Hana, what helps him train and phase shift to the next level is he fully visualizes. He has this talent of fully visualizing his opponent in front of him, and he trains through this visualization of like, it's called like shadow boxing or something, but he gets hurt through this as well. Like he suffers pain from this. And you could even say that this is like the level of, wrestling that Jacob is going through, according to some commentaries, when he's fighting the angel, right? This is like this full internal struggle that, could leave, in a way, weaker form, leaves a writer with writer block, right? Like I can't write, my arm won't work, like to leaving someone, leaving Jacob limping from this interaction with his inner self. Like it was so traumatic that it was physically difficult for him.
Yeah.
So that's one interpretation, that one is never alone, even if he's alone. There's another interpretation, which is like, the Torah itself is God's name in a certain sense. So like you are learning, like even if you're alone, by learning the Torah, you are evoking his name just built into the system because you are learning his word. So ultimately he's always there with you. But I think these are just, these are like the general commentaries, which are nice, but generally we're seeing a focus over here that is like, it doesn't matter if you're in a group or if you're in alone. Like the point is like the acting of engaging like in the sacred text of the Torah, or like will bring in the divine presence. That's what the invitation is. Like if you are learning God and you are understanding God, then you are bringing him closer to you. And it's conveying a sense of like encouragement to be doing this, no matter what the circumstances is. So whether you find yourself like alone, or whether you find yourself like in a huge community, and the Torah is always focusing how you need to be, the Mishnah is always focusing how you need to be part of community, how important that is. But it's also letting even if you're alone, even if you're in that person that's like, which we've already spoken about how dangerous it is to be the person that's in the fringe and alone. But even this person, even if he's alone, should realize God is always with him, and he could always interact with God in that sense.
Yeah.
Hala? Okay. Scribble down if you don't mind. Let me just also make sure that hitting our comments. TLC everywhere all at once. Yeah. But this is serious, not casual. Right. Okay. Okay. Beseder. Okay. Where were we? You scroll down? You did.
Yeah.
Rabbi Eliezer Ish Bartuta Omer. תן לו משלו, שאתה ושלך שלו. וכן בדוד הוא אומר, כי ממך הכל ומידך נתנו לך. רבי יעקב אומר, המהלך בדרך ושונה, הוא מפסיק במשנתו ואומר, מה נאה אילן זה, ומה נאה ניר זה. מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו מתחייב בנפשו. I just see Plevis is writing over here. Plevis, thank you for earlier, Chezi. No insult intended from my end. Plevis, not at all. I'm not fully sure what you're referencing. Like, I didn't see a comment of yours that I found offensive. But all love. We're all working through a lot of stuff, and I'm glad that you're here. Rabbi Eliezer Elazar of Barbosa. It sounds like he's like a pirate. Barbosa would say, "Give him what is his. Give him what is his. For you and whatever is yours are his." And as David says, "For everything comes from you, and from your own hand we give it to you." Rabbi Yaakov would say, one who walks along a road and studies and interrupts his studies to say, how beautiful is this tree? How beautiful is this plugged field? The Torah considers it as if he had forfeited his life, always with these extreme closers over here. Yeah. Okay. So what do we have over here? So first of all, we have Rabbi Elazar, this dude from Barbuta. So he was famous for keeping a lot of the commandments, a lot of the mitzvah, doing a lot of these righteous deeds. And he was also really known for being extremely, extremely giving, a philanthropist of sorts. They gave a lot of charity. They say that, I'm sorry?
That makes sense based on what he's just saying.
Exactly. That makes sense based on what he's just saying. And so much so that they would say that the poor people of the town wouldn't ask him for money because they would fear that he would give them everything and he'd be left with nothing. Because they're like, you don't need to do us any favors. We know you're really, really into doing those stuff.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of my mother-in-law. Like, we know that we shouldn't say, "Oh, what a nice plate," or "what a nice," like, because we know once we say that, she will give it.
I joke around that my wife is like the nicest person in the world, and that, like, if she was being mugged, she would tell the guy, like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't bring my credit card. If I would have known, I would have brought. Like, I'm just like, I only have small bills. I'll quickly make them for you." So, anyways, I get that. Okay, so we say, "Ten lo mishalo, shata v'shelcha shelo." Big statement over here, right? Give him what is his, God being his, for you, and whatever is yours are his. So ultimately, when one gives charity, he should feel that he's giving ultimately what is God's, right? Everything here is God's. Everything we have, everything we own, all comes from God. So when we give charity, we want it to feel like I'm giving something of my own and I'm losing. Rather, I'm just paying it forward, so to speak, like we were saying earlier. There are some interpretations. Sorry, go ahead.
So just to make sure, like, when you just said that, you said it's for God, but like, if I look at the Hebrew, I didn't even consider it. I thought it was just two people. Ten lo mishelo, like, give the other person his. Because obviously in the Hebrew, like, you can't tell if it's like a person or a God. There's no capital, let's say, where you have like capital H. So I'm assuming there's commentaries on how it's either.
Well, you could be looking at this at multiple levels, as in give it to your neighbor, because ultimately it only works though if you bring in what I said on the former. Like, give your neighbor because ultimately what's yours is his. That's because ultimately what's his and yours is all God's.
Right.
So it's the next order basically at that point. Now, this is like an intense line, if you think about it, like, because you could very quickly get to a place, and I'm just thinking about it because I mentioned this in the last stream, like a few, like whatever, an hour ago, that ultimately this is what we saw humans used to do. You sacrifice yourself because that is the ultimate, because I'm yours. And that's how you could really feel like you fully have given yourself, which people in ecstatic conditions have done many, many times, right? The Aztecs, like they're all going up because like this is really the ultimate sacrifice. Like I could give you a calf, I could burn some incense, but like here is like a virgin, right? Like and like in a real sense, like if you look at this statement, that is where it leads you to at the end of the day. That is like the logical conclusion. If you want to give back, you are giving back all of you at the end of the day. However,
even just praying and giving tzedakah, and even just praying and studying Torah is like you're giving yourself. You're taking away from things that you could do, or from things like even if you consider your family, like you're not spending time with your family, you're going to somewhere else. So it's also giving up parts of yourself.
What I'm challenging is I'm saying a statement like this is sort of telling you then like why ultimately am I not giving myself me?
Mm-hmm.
Like why at some point am I not looking at this and being like, okay, like just take me back because I'm yours. Right. That is like the biggest gift I could give you back is like I'm returning to you. So
complete unity. Yeah.
This is also the wording is important. God tested Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
He did not. The question arises, did God not test Isaac? Right? He's the one that's getting sacrificed. But we know, or as we learn, as the Kabbalists also teach us, that Isaac represents din, represents justice, the left hand of God, so to speak. And in that logical sense, if you look at it that way, then you're like, yes, of course, ultimately I'm giving up myself. And Isaac was his mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The test is for Abraham to come and say, you don't follow this to its logical conclusion. Rather, this is the difference between God's wisdom that the philosophers could play around with and God's will through prophecy, which is Ratzon Hashem. But I don't want you to do that, Abraham. This is the test. The test is even though that's where the logical conclusion leads to, and that's where everyone around you is doing, and your son is willing to do it, that's the environment you're in, right? Like everyone's chill. The test is, and the lesson is, no, you're not doing it. That's not what I want. My will is something else than the wisdom that through its mathematical language in this world brings you to the conclusion. I want something else. I want something higher. That's just an offshoot of this. But I'm saying this sentence of ten lo meshalosh atav shelo is like a very, very scary sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, God had us covered. Okay, we'll move on. V'chen David, what's the source for this? We say David. V'chen David omer ki mimcha kol u'miyadcha natnu lecha. Right. So this is what when King David is collecting treasures for the temple. These are things that are given to him, and he's telling the people of Israel, "Give me your treasures and don't hold it close to your heart, because ultimately all of this is his."
Mm-hmm.
Also, there you could also look at this as saying, yes, God gave me life, but now forever I'm walking back to this same point of being like, since I'm born now, I'm always going to have to give him back. To that, the answer would be, this is really mechadesh kol yom ma'aseh bereshit. This is God that's not just the God of the Big Bang. Rather, this is this is not just the unmoved mover that did one move and stepped away. Rather, this is the God that every single day is involved in sustaining life and creating life. Some who want could interpret this as evolution, as this is constantly happening every single moment of every single day, and this is showing how this is constantly we're moving forward towards a certain goal. So God's involvement and God's renewal and God's gift is eternal and continuous. So it brings us back to recognizing that it's not that like we were born or one day when 13.8 billion years ago. Rather, here today, now at this very moment, it's still all His. I'm a big fan of God. So what we're learning over here is we're really seeing like that, like it's also reminding us that ownership in general, like, I'm not trying to sound like a communist, but like, is transit. And like we have responsibilities of what that is to steward what we have and really pass it forward properly to the next generation. That could be wisdom, that could be material things, but we have to see how much we focus on these things and how much we see them as like ours.
Right. And it's interesting that this is practical at different levels, because obviously in Israel, when there is a Sanhedrin, or assuming that they're really all estate is temporary, right? There are laws like 50 years, 7 years, like you don't really own it. But in a way that kind of like needs to in a fractal fashion needs to shape our whole understanding of this dual existence, kind of like what we spoke about in Sukkot, where you're living in this hut, this temporary hut, understanding that things are temporal, there's this fight, or paradox between like the infinite and the finite.
Thinking like what's eerie is, the Simchat Torah, when this devastating attack happened on Israel, is the day that we leave, the first day that we leave the sukkah, we leave the hut. Mm-hmm. And in a certain sense, Israel was leaning back on its kochi u'otzem yadi, right? My power and the strength of my hand, which God always warns us about, right? We had this technological Eden. We had all our informants. We had the best intelligence, right? So that is the stable house that we built ourselves. That's our Tower of Babel. But God says, like, I tell you to be in your sukkah, because the day you leave your sukkah, the second you leave that understanding that this is my game, that's how quickly you could get ransacked. People can be ripped out of their homes, literally. So, this is it's close, touches close to home, like, sort of that interpretation as far as seeing it that way.
Yeah.
We have to realize that, yes, that these things are temporary, and prioritize them accordingly.
Yeah, and I feel like people have this. I'm sure, because I've had this feeling multiple times in my life. It doesn't take a terrorist attack for you to do something like that to you. Even just going to the doctor, and then the doctor telling you have this specific illness now. You suddenly get some kind of like a diagnosis, and you're this is kind of like the, when people say like something else, like something fell on me. Like at that moment, I was completely different, and you realize that like right before that you were one thing, and then right after that you're suddenly a person plus that thing, which is really, it's very hard. It's this gap that you can. It's this experiential perspective I'm trying to tie in, like Vervaeke here, the gap that you can't experience until you actually have are part of it, or until you actually experience it. So yeah, I don't remember what my exact point with what was, but
I agree that it's something that you need to experience, and people talk about like, the Jubilee year being like sort of like a utopian understanding of like what could actually be like, we're letting all these people loose right now and we're giving rid of debts, but it could work, like we said, on an individual level. If it starts, there's a famous movie like Pay It Forward, if it actually starts from within the community. And again, like I'm just saying, when I see the people of Israel now, not the government, the people of Israel right now are an example of what that looks like. It looks like everyone in every way, like it looks like these people in these houses are displaced right now, all these communities. All my clients, their reaction was, can we use our homes for them to stay in? Mm-hmm. Right? And you'd be like, really? Yeah, really, of course. Give them these houses, give them these stuff. I have this other client, he's a heavy hitter, and he was like, what can I do? I'm like, wait. I'm like, because these people are going to need to come back to communities. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to rebuild these communities, infrastructure. I'm like, if you're a heavy hitter, don't buy right now like 10 bags of food. Donate a community, right? Build, and the attitude is like, yes, of course, that's what I want to do. And that togetherness, that is what it looks like to then have a to be in that mindset, not when you're pushed against the wall, but on the day-to-day. If you recognize that, if you see how much good you could actually do so quickly, how you could galvanize so quickly, right? Like even the protest, they took that energy, right? The protest against Netanyahu, and quickly reoriented into like all these WhatsApp groups that we had, immediately turned into like, okay, these are charity WhatsApp groups right now. So that to me is how you build that kind of reality, how it really looks at those 50 years. Yes, everyone, we want you to go free because that's we have a system that could allow for that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Again, this is my route into understanding this. So this is why I'm mentioning Verveki, but this is the beautiful thing of thinking about the liturgical year, the Jewish year, as a form of a psychotechnology where no matter what, at one point of year, you consider the temporality of life. You go sit in a place and you realize that, like, if it's raining, like then it's going to be uncomfortable, or that you actually need to build something even though you have no idea how to build it. Because all you do is sit and work on the computer, let's say, right? So those things that they force you to realize something, to put yourself in a different place, almost like its own Egypt, right? Like it forces you to go to a place, experience that, and then take that back and apply it, and then make things better in a different way.
As Peterson mentioned, commented quite nicely with regards to Nehushtan. Nehushtan was the copper serpent that was made in the desert that eventually we get rid of it because it ends up causing for idol worship. But Moses tells the Israelites that complain about they're dealing with the serpent in the desert and we're dying. And instead of creating a miracle and making the serpents disappear, God tells Moses to create this serpent. And Moses tells the people, whoever looks at the serpent will live, and whoever doesn't won't. And there was an interpretation that Jordan Peterson gave, which was this is the first sense of exposure therapy, which is like there's always serpents in the desert, and there's always a serpent in the garden, going back to the Garden of Eden. How do you deal with that? The ones who look up at the serpent and recognize that like this is reality, you have to take it as it is and move forward, then those people survive. Those who are completely flabbergasted by reality and can't attempt even to look at this, then they're not going to be able to make it.
Yeah, even those, just even more practical. If you look at the serpent and you see its shape and you see how it looks, and then you're more likely to recognize it in the wild when you're walking around. So you're going to be more prepared.
Yes, and even what the serpent itself symbolizes, coming from the staff. And here you have them both together. The staff is upright, straight, showing proper orientation and order. And you have, and this is always the flip side of Moses, right? He's the basket on the water. He deals with the Red Sea, that he has to split it. And even here, there's a sense where like he throws a stick down in front of Pharaoh and it turns into a serpent, showing it could turn into chaos very, very quickly. This order that I'm presenting you right now, Pharaoh, could turn into chaos very quickly. And the Israelites need to look at this staff and recognize that like this chaos is always existing. You have to learn how to deal with it and wrap it around order. And as we say, watatim shol bo, and you will have to deal. And in a certain way, it's almost the snake wrapped around the tree. Okay, after we eat from this tree and we leave, we have to realize now that we ate from this tree, we have to realize that we're always going to have to contend with the serpent that's around it, with the chaos that is around it as well.
Right. And now for some, I'm saying this just so I don't forget it as well.
Sure.
I just realized that mashal, which is parable, I guess you can say, is also for like timshol, is related to timshol, and maybe the idea there as well is that once you are able to take an idea and to put it in the form of a parable, you truly understand it and rule over it.
That's good. I like that.
And that's why
we see the prophets obviously speak in that language. And there's a sense where like also to us, like if we could understand these prophetic, you go all the way back to the potential understanding of the story of Eden as allegorical, right?
Yeah.
That is extremely deep, right? Or like what Maimonides is talking about, like looking at the chariot, like this is, it's more than meets the eye. And the more you understand these terms, the more you could, well, as we were saying earlier, as far as the chariot descenders, right? It requires you leaving your viewpoint and then seeing others.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing a comment over here. This stream is yeshiva. Good to listen to it in the background. If you could expand on that, William, are you saying that this sounds like the echoing of the voices of the study hall in the yeshiva? And if so, thanks, I guess. All right. I like that. Vatatim shobo. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. I mean, you see a real sense of that with the scapegoat, lack of a better term in English, where there is an interpretation, as Nachmanides mentions, where it's recognizing that evil exists and meeting it, going out once a year to the fringe and actually like getting into a dialogue with it and sacrificing something to it almost, which is, we go as far as saying that like, it's almost like we recognize other powers, quote unquote, idol worship. Like we're going to this, like this evil power out in the desert that some people even called Azazel, but we're only doing it because we're commanded of God to do so. So like this again goes back to the only person that commanded us to build idol is God, asking us to build the snake or asking us to build these cherubs. Mm-hmm. But the snake and Azazel is both God saying like, there is evil in the fringe. And sometimes, like in Job, I allow it in a certain sense to do its thing, right? But if you don't ignore it, if you know that it's there, as in if you expose yourself to it, or once a year, if you sacrifice something to it, if you recognize that it's something that needs to be contended with, then you are going to be much safer, like you said, knowing when evil actually sprouts its face. And let's just mention one more thing about this, just because it's Genesis. We read with regards to Cain and Abel, right? It's very short verse, but Vayomar Cain lehevel achiv, right? Cain speaks to his brother, calls it this, Cain speaks to Abel, his brother, and then it says Vayakom, he rose up, right, and he kills him. And there's different interpretations of this, but people ask, why did he rise up? Was he lying down? Was he sitting down? So there's a midrash that says that actually there was already a battle already began, but Abel was much more able. He was much stronger, and he pinned Cain down. So in order to get out, Cain says, "Vayomar Cain el hevel achiv." He said, "My brother." I'm going to use your Western terms. You're my brother. So then Abel lets go. The second Abel lets go, Cain raises up and kills him. And he uses his own language against him. If we can't discern between evil and good, and I'm using this as the backdrop of what's going on in Israel right now, if we can't see, like, what about the proportionality? The people on both sides, if we can't recognize the evil, then we will get bitten again. And your so-called brother will rise up against you and kill you, because Hamas is saying, we're a children's hospital. We're brothers. But that's what you're shooting the rocket out of. Right? And if you can't see that difference, sorry if I'm taking it too personal. That was a mistake. Anyways.
You're good.
Stand my point.
I'm point taken. I don't disagree with that point. So.
Okay, what was William saying? Yes, but where is Yentl? Well, Yentl is not so controversial anymore, because all Barbara Streisand would have to do is just say, I identify as a yeshiva man. And that's it. It was a much shorter movie today. One rabbi said, you see God out of the corner of your eye. He's always there. As another rabbi said, late atar painui mine, there is no space void of you. Okay, back to where we were. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Hamalech b'derech veshoneh, הוא מפסיק במשנתו ואומר, מה נאה לאן זה ומה נאה ניר זה, מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו הוא מתחייב בנפשו, right? So we have this guy walking, Rav Yaakov says, and he sees what a beautiful tree, or look at this beautiful field, and he was in the middle of Torah study, then he is forfeiting his life. Rabbi Yaakov is, it's not really also clear who he is. Some people say that this is the Rabbi Jacob, who was the teacher of Judah the Prince, who really gave him, this is where Judah the Prince is getting, getting all his inspiration from, really. And let's try to get into this though. So we're talking over here that here he's clearly saying the Torah should be your only focus, right? Obviously mentioning priorities over here.
Yeah.
When we say that he's shoneh, right? That he was, what does it say in English? One who walks the road and studies. So one who walks on the road and studies, just so we should realize what that means, there's no Kindle and there's no iPads. That means he's shoneh. He is memorizing. We're seeing an example over here of a little window into what the life of someone that is studying Torah, like we just said. The prerequisite is if you're walking, you're probably memorizing, right? We said we have these little moments right now. You're walking, so you're going to be studying. You're doing the act of shinun. You're doing the act of memorization, which eventually, as I'm saying that it's Judah the Prince, his student, Judah the Prince, that's how their interaction would have been. Judah the Prince eventually decides, whoa, I'm done with this memorizing while we're walking. We need to write this stuff down. Apparently, people are getting distracted by beautiful trees. We need to get this thing written down. The Baal Shem Tov also sees this as, while even trees have a blessing on them, I think this is also like the point they're saying, even a tree has a blessing, so you say, you'd be like, why is it a big deal to stop and make the blessing for the tree? The Baal Shem Tov says, like, because you're severing yourself from God. You are learning Torah, which is like at a higher level as far as like, even though there's a blessing, the study of connecting to the divine itself is the ultimate. So like, even if you're stopping for a blessing, you're sort of downgrading, yourself.
Yeah.
Another issue which comes up, which is a moment ago, we said all is his, right? So like, if all is his, why are we not saying like, the tree is also his? So like, obviously like this is all happening under the umbrella of Torah, which is where my knee-jerk reaction sort of goes to. Now, I think we should put Rav Yaakov in context over here, because I think it's either in Perek Gimel or it's in Perek Daled, or in the 4th chapter, but he has a famous line about this world. How does it go? Ha'olam hazeh domeh leprozdor b'fnei ha'olam haba. Hatken atzmecha b'prozdor kedei shetikanes latraklim. So this world sort of looks like a hallway to the world to come. And you should prepare yourself in the hallway so you'll be able to go into the grand room, to the grand palace. So taking that and bringing it over here and focusing actually on the wording over here. Rav Yaakov says, he who walks along the road and studies and interrupts his studies, v'sheyafsik. So and I'm going back to this last thing I said about the corridor and the world to come. You could ultimately say, why is there not this dichotomy between there's this world and there's the world to come? That is not the world that Rav Yaakov is saying. Rav Yaakov is giving an example of a hallway. A hallway is inside your house. Okay, if all the doors are closed, the hallway seems very dark. However, if you have some doors that open up, lights from the main hall still makes itself in. So it's a continuum.
It's a connection between pieces.
Exactly. And because it's a connection, if we would have read the Mishnah differently, if we said, we'll try it this way, Hamehalech baderech v'shoneh, ve'omer ma na'eh ilan zeh u'ma na'eh nir zeh, it would be, he studied Torah. Or in English, I would say, one who walks along the road and studies and sees a beautiful tree and says how beautiful the tree is, that wouldn't be a problem. The problem is that he stopped. He created this difference between like, I'm going to stop studying right now and I'm going to bless the tree. However, if your mindset is, this is all one flow, right? Part of my study is the appreciation of the beauty, then you could say, then that person is not forfeiting his life. He is
Right.
someone that's under the umbrella. He is someone that's recognizing that he's in the hallway trying to make his way to the grand hall. But one who sees himself in a separate house, this is Torah study, and now I'm going to see a nice tree, even though he's going to say a blessing, there was a severing over there. He looks at them as different, and he didn't recognize that they're all, back to what we just said earlier, all is his. You just have to be able to hold that kind of mindset of that this is happening all the time, everywhere, at once.
Right. Yeah. That kind of connects to. I've heard this story before, and that kind of connects to the question that I've heard there. The issue that I've heard there. The issue is not about looking at the tree per se, just by in itself, but the fact that you separate it, that you see that as separate than the work of God, or the Torah doesn't speak about that, or is that's not connected. It's just two separate things. It's almost kind of like thinking about the like you're learning Torah, but then when you're dealing with people, you don't care, you don't really care about them, or you act in an unprofessional way. So you're not really putting those things together. It's as if it's as if the Torah for you, it's a portal, and then everything else is like it's a portal to another world, but you're in a separate one.
So correct. I would say I would stress even more, even if you recognize that there's a blessing on the tree, it's still, there's like, you're still creating this hierarchy. And if you create the hierarchy, which is not ideal, it's almost like sort of like now it's too late. Like now you're forced to act by that hierarchy.
Yeah.
And now that that's your hierarchy, because you decided to play in a more limited game, those are the rules you impose on yourself. And now you are forfeiting your life because you have this hierarchy. However, if you're more open to seeing this thing as a continuum, then obviously you don't have this issue. Rav Shirky gives an example of how there's people that, because we have a blessing. There's Birkat Ilanot. There's a blessing we make on the trees. So there's people that run to do it because they want to be Zrizin Makdimim Mitzvot. You should try to be the first one to participate in the mitzvah, in this just act. So do it as early as you can, right? The early bird sort of gets the stone. So also with the early bird doing the first mitzvah. So there's people that run out the second the tree starts to show like its first little leaf, and so they want to make their blessing. But those are people that I'm saying are playing at the lower level, I think, because to them it's very systemized. However, I think it's, don't be the first one to say it. Rather, take your family, Rav Shirky says, to the field and bask in all of God's glory with regards to like now when all the trees are fully blossoming, where you are taking it fully in and participating in making this blessing as part of that. I never stopped my learning. Rather, like when I left my study hall with my family, this was because it's all part of the flow. And I wanted to bring them into this place where like, I'm not stopping from my studying learning. Rather, I'm enhancing and I'm embodying my study learning by being in the field when it's fully in bloom.
That's a good point.
I think we'll stop there.
Yeah, sounds good.